A rescue helicopter's plucked 6 people to safety from the former Radio Caroline ship, which has gone aground 7 miles off Ramsgate. The Coast Guard's union is warning there'd be insufficient resources to cope with another Zeebrugge-type disaster. Terry Waite has spent his first night of freedom with his family at RAF Lyneham in Wiltshire, and travellers on a site near Ashford stopped the council evicting a single mum and her 4 children from their caravan. Those are the headlines. Details from the newsroom in our bulletin at 9 o'clock.
Terry Waite's today expected to have more medical checks at RAF Lyneham in Wiltshire. An initial examination didn't reveal any serious problems. The United Nations Secretary-General says he's received a promise that the remaining Western hostages in Lebanon will be set free by Christmas.
6 people have been rescued from a ship which ran aground on sands off Ramsgate in Kent. The vessel, the Ross Revenge, from which the former pirate station Radio Caroline was broadcast, began to drag its anchor in heavy seas. Peter Hunt reports.
The ship, the Ross Revenge, got into trouble at about 4 o'clock this morning. The 6 people on board the vessel, which is the home of the former pirate radio station Radio Caroline, realised they were touching the bottom. An RAF rescue helicopter went to the scene, but the crew at first wanted to remain on board while it was towed to safety. But then it began to keel over on its side, and the 6 people were winched off. They've now been taken to RAF Manston. A lifeboat sent to assist in the rescue operation also ran aground for a short time. Coast Guards at Dover say the sea in the area is very rough.
Invicta Supergold, the best music, the latest news.
Time now exactly 10 o'clock. Let's catch up with the latest. John has all the details.
6 people are recovering at RAF Manston after being airlifted to safety from the former Radio Caroline ship, which has gone aground off Ramsgate. They were taken off by helicopter amid fears the Ross Revenge was in imminent danger of capsizing. DJ Neil Gates was listening to Invicta, totally oblivious to the danger as the ship drifted towards the Goodwin Sands.
Yes, that's right. I was sort of in the mess room at the stern of the boat when we had Invicta on. And all of a sudden there was a shudder all the way through the boat. And we went up onto the bridge and we could see the coastline much closer than it normally is.
MPs today begin a debate on Europe.
The vessel, the Ross Revenge, from which the former pirate station Radio Caroline was broadcast, began to drag its anchor in heavy seas.
Finally, the Kent weather.
3.1, time for the latest news at 11 with Mike Jones.
6 people are recovering at RAF Manston after being airlifted to safety from the former Radio Caroline ship, which has gone aground off Ramsgate. They were taken off by helicopter amid fears the Ross Revenge was in imminent danger of capsizing. DJ Neil Gates was listening to Invicta Radio, totally oblivious to the danger as the ship drifted towards the Goodwin Sands.
Yes, that's right. I was sort of in the mess room at the stern of the boat when we had Invicta on. And all of a sudden there was shudder all the way through the boat, and we went up onto the bridge and we could see the coastline much closer than it normally is.
A man's been flown to hospital by the air ambulance after a crash on the A2.
This is Essex Radio.
The Midday News, this is Doug Neagle, which spent 5 years moored off the Essex coast as the home of Radio Caroline, has run aground off Kent. The Ross Revenge was anchored off Clacton in the 80s. Gordon Fudge reports.
In June 1987, the Ross Revenge was moved to its latest position off the Kent coast. The transmitters were shut down last year when the government changed the law. Bosses at Caroline were hoping for a new licence, but this morning the ship slipped its anchor and ran aground on the Goodwin Sands. Caroline manager Peter Moore blames government officials for their predicament.
Determined to blockade us into submission, and we feel they won, I suppose, this morning.
All the crew have been airlifted clear, and a salvage operation is expected to get underway at the next tide.
That's the news at 3 minutes.
Invicta News with Mike Jones. 6 recovering after sea rescue off Ramsgate.
Time it hit the sandbank, it started to roll over a bit more.
The woman who wrote a postcard to Hezbollah in Beirut, and TVS announces 200 job losses for February. Good afternoon. 6 crew members who were airlifted to safety from a ship sinking off the Ramsgate coast are now recovering from their ordeal. Radio Caroline's boat, the Ross Revenge, had drifted 17 miles onto the Goodwin Sands. The crew were rescued by a helicopter from RAF Manston amid fears that the boat was about to capsize. The ship's now upright. Rescue services hope to float it off sands later today. Jill Madeley reports.
Crew members were woken in the middle of the night to shudders and loud bangs as a boat hit sandbanks off the Ramsgate coast. DJ Neil Gates says they were terrified they wouldn't get off in
It
time.
was very frightening, particularly when the ship started banging on the bottom, because each time it hit the sandbank, it started to roll over a bit more. And each time it hit the sandbank, it went further over onto its side. And we were worried that the ship was actually going to capsize.
Head of News Steve Conway says it won't mean the end of the radio station.
Caroline lost a ship in 1980 when the Mi Amigo sank. If we've lost this ship, it will not be the end. We'll come back bigger and better than ever before.
Rescue services are on standby to float the vessel off the sands at high tide this evening.
As Terry Waite begins to recover at RAF Lynham from his hostage ordeal.
Off the coast of Kent tonight, ready to try and refloat the Radio Caroline ship, the Ross Revenge, and bring it into Dover Harbour. It ran aground on the Goodwin Sands after breaking an anchor chain in bad weather.